Call to order the meeting of the Plan Commission for the City of Verona on Monday, January 6, 2020 at 6:30 p.m. We'll begin with the roll.
Commissioner Tucker Long.
Here.
Commissioner Manley.
Here.
Commissioner Bear.
Here.
Mayor Diaz.
Here.
Alderperson Gaskell.
Here.
Commissioner Lytle. Here. Commissioner Heinzen.
All right, we have a quorum. Next up, we have public comment. If anyone from the public wishes to speak, now would be the time to do so. Seeing nobody rushing up to the podium, we'll move on to item 4, approval of the minutes from the December 2nd, 2019 Plan Commission meeting. Questions, comments, motions? Motion by Alder Gaskell, is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Tucker Long. Last chance for corrections on the minutes. Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes from the December 2nd, 2019 Plan Commission meeting, say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And the minutes are approved. Next, we'll move on to item 5, which is a public hearing regarding a conditional use permit for proposed in-vehicle sales or service land use to construct a drive-through to be located at 150 West End Circle. Before we get into the public hearing for this, Mr. Sayer, if you could give us a brief overview.
Thank you. This is a conditional use permit, and it requires a public hearing before the Plan Commission. As part of this, we did notify all property owners within 200 feet of the request. We also published a Class 2 notice in the newspaper, posted it on the website, and then also posted signs in the property. This is a recommendation tonight to the Common Council. So if there is a recommendation, this would be on the council agenda for next Monday night's meeting.
Thank you for that overview. And with that, I will move we open a public hearing regarding a conditional use permit for proposed in-vehicle sales or service land use to construct a drive-through to be located at 150 West End Circle. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Tucker Long. All those in favor of opening the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And we are in the public hearing regarding this topic at 6:32 p.m. Once again, I'm not seeing anyone rush up to the podium. With that, a motion to close the public hearing would be in order. Motion by Commissioner Tucker Long. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Bear. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And the public hearing is closed at 6:32 p.m. Mr. Sayer.
Thank you. Once again, tonight we have a conditional use permit and a site plan approval for the property at 150 West End Circle. The request is to construct a drive-through for Summit Credit Union that requires the conditional use permit and site plan. This is the site plan that was approved, I believe, about a year ago. This is currently under construction. If you drove out there, there's, I think, sticks coming out of the ground right now on most of the buildings. So it is actively under construction as we speak. The applicant is looking at constructing a drive-through approximately in this location here that would serve the Summit Credit Union branch that would be located in one of the buildings along Verona Avenue. We did have an initial review of this in November of 2019. There were comments from the Plan Commission, including several concerns about the several points of conflict, pedestrian concerns. Could the drive-through entrance and exit be integrated with the parking lot? And are there better designs to the drive-through at this option? So as part of this, we did look at other options that, other ideas, I guess, that how this could actually function. One of the ideas was to try to put this in the existing parking lot. So we have an option that would come in from the west here, kind of dive towards Stevens Way and come back out to the north. Challenge with this is that there'd be losing parking spaces as part of this idea. Parking already on this site is at a premium, and the loss of these spaces here could create some potential issues. A second option is basically the same idea again. It's just trying to extend that lane out a little bit further than what was in the previous one. We have the PTM, the personal teller machine. That machine is a typical ATM, but then also has the functions of you can request assistance as part of a banker during the day. So if you needed help with the deposit, a personal banker would come on to the screen and assist you. Here you get your 100 feet behind the PTM, and then you get that minimum of, I think, 40 feet beyond. It does work, but once again, we have that loss of parking. And finally, this is the one that the Plan Commission looked at last time, where the traffic would come from Stevens Way, kind of go into the one-way here. Here would be the PTM. There'd be a stop here, and they could make a right out, not a left out. This is the one that's actually preferred by the applicant and also by the city's traffic engineer. We had him look at kind of all three of these options. There were a variety of other ideas that were thrown around. The challenge we've run into is that with the ordinance requiring that 100 feet behind the PTM and 40 feet beyond it, it makes trying to put this into the middle of the parking lot incredibly challenging. And it also results in the loss of enough parking spaces that it makes it question, is this the best option for the property? Staff, from a staff level standpoint, we're comfortable with this design here. We think it's appropriate. It's meeting the requirements of the ordinance, and we don't have any concerns with that. We did go through the findings of facts for the conditional use permit that are required as part of this, and it does meet the requirements. And staff, based upon that, recommends the Plan Commission recommend the Common Council approval of the conditional use permit to allow for the in-vehicle sales and service land use to be constructed, to construct a drive-through to be located at 150 West End Circle, and then second, approve the site plan allowing for the construction of a drive-through located at 150 West End Circle. The applicants are here tonight, and they'd be happy to answer any questions from the Plan Commission.
You've heard the explanation. We will start out with 5A, which is a conditional use permit recommendation to the council. Questions, comments? Alder Gaskell.
So if we're losing 8 to 9 potential parking spaces, if that was not a concern, would the city engineer have any issue with the internal location?
I think if we started looking at this, and if you disregarded the stacking comments, or not comments, the code requirement from a stacking standpoint, there's a very good chance this would end up potentially somewhere in this location here, potentially. But with what the code says from the 100 feet behind and the 40 feet beyond, it severely limits kind of where it can go. So I think if the city engineer had a druthers, he would probably be ignoring that stacking requirement and then most likely looking at the middle of the parking lot for some place to put this.
So can you go to the next slide, please?
And go that one? Keep going.
Maybe going backwards then.
Yep, this one. This is the first one.
Okay. So the second one, we're meeting the ordinance. The next option that has
Both-
the stacking.
Both of these
do?
you'd be meeting it technically,
Okay.
yeah. But you'd be losing those parking spaces.
So the issue is losing parking spaces. It's not necessarily that our city engineer has an issue with the internal location. It's because we're losing parking.
I think the concern from losing parking comes from more of the planning staff and also the developer of just parking is going to be at a premium out here already, and losing some spaces for this, it's a tough pill to swallow.
Okay. And what percentage then is 8 or 9 spaces of the total?
I don't have that off the top of my head. I think there's about, give or take, 100 spaces out here, 80-ish. I'm looking at Dan as he wrinkles his forehead and he's shaking his head. I don't have that number in front of me. I think the challenge is if you start losing parking, you already have, when we looked at this, Steve Brown Apartment owns the apartment buildings to the south, and the thought there already was there's going to be some shared parking with there potentially with employees, and the more parking you kind of start cutting into, it just limits potentially some of the users out in that spot.
Okay. I think for me, it's not we're losing parking, but we're not just losing parking for the sake of losing parking. There's a gain we're getting from it, and I don't know that compromising potential safety of pedestrians and bicyclists and other motorists simply to save 8 parking spaces justifies it for me. If it looks like it's going to work in here and the concern is only that we're losing parking, not that actually we're creating more conflict with an internal location, and it doesn't sound like that's necessarily a concern from the engineer anyway.
The one thing the applicant did tell us was that this PTM will have typically 4 to 12 users per day, so we're talking a very low volume type user. So they don't anticipate a lot of traffic coming through here. If that helps.
Anything further, Alder Gaskell? Other question, Commissioner Tucker-Long?
Is there a way to count, since this is, if we move it internal or more internal, is there a way to count the parking lane, like the actual lanes in the parking lot in the 100 feet and 40 feet, since, I mean, they're not going out onto a road?
Yeah, we got kind of generous in our calculations on a couple of these already. So we were trying to do that to as much as we felt comfortable doing it. So yes, there is the slight way of doing that, but you still are losing those spaces as well too. That's the ultimate challenge.
Other comments? Commissioner Lytle?
Can you maybe one slide ahead, Adam? One more. The changes to where the ramps are, is that something that's being done already, or is this something we're expecting to be done as part of the installation of drive-through?
The sidewalk ramps?
Correct.
No, so the site plan that was approved, let me just go back again. This is the site plan that was approved. So we did not have a sidewalk in this location. And the thought there being is that we wanted to try to direct people into the property and not so much along Stephen Way. So the only modification we're talking is there's a slight modification in this location here, where that ramp comes straight across and there's not really any type of, this would be removed, I guess, as part of it. You'd have these two existing ramps removed and we'd have a realigned one to direct people through there.
Right, so that's going to happen regardless of whether there's a PTM drive-through installed, or is that occurring because of the drive-through?
That's occurring because of the drive-through. So if the drive-through is not there, we'd have there's an existing curb cut here that would be utilized. Instead, with the drive-through, they would take out that ramp there and just shift it over to this location here, so it would line up directly across.
Okay, I mean, personally, that's probably an improvement in terms of how high schoolers are going to be traveling. I mean, that's chaos theory in terms of guessing how they're going to be traveling, but it seems like a more direct approach versus going back and forth. So that much is encouraging to me. I do agree that it's unfortunate that we were that tight on parking spaces to begin with, that the addition of this is putting us in such a tight situation when it comes to that, but I guess it is what it is at this point.
Commissioner Heinzen?
Sure. What authority do you have to waive the 100? Thanks. to modify the 100 feet.
So there's two ways. One, they could request a variance, which typically by law should not be granted, just with the variance requirements. But second would be an amendment to the plan development with his amendment to the GDP and request an exemption as part of it. There's option as we are rewriting the code right now. As we get into that code rewrite, if there was discussion of that pretty quickly, we could go back and amend it, and then simply we could work with the applicant and amend the site plan as if that code was amended at some point earlier in the process with the zoning code rewrite. That's a potential option. I don't know how realistic it is until we get too deep, when we get deeper into that, but otherwise they're in that plan development process for an exemption.
Sure. And I'm asking the question, I think you said earlier that there's the expectation of somewhere between 4 and 12 cars a day. And if that is a reasonable expectation, then it seems that maybe if we can trust that 100 feet seems to be unnecessary.
I think regardless of when the code is rewritten, that those numbers are going to be modified and they're going to be lessened, or at least in a situation of trying to identify when that requirement is appropriate for some uses. So I mean, if you're talking a fast food type use, coffee, it's probably appropriate versus this, or quite honestly, even the bank drive-through nowadays. I think it's debatable if that's needed or required.
Commissioner Manley?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I wonder if there would be any reason that we couldn't consider, as we look at the the drive-through that's associated with building C4, adding, there's an area where, adjacent to the building where it's like shaded light gray on that map. If we could add another lane there, right, yeah, and have the PTM located where there's already going to be a drive-through anyway.
Yeah, I think the intent there is looks like there's a bypass lane in there for the potential drive-through that's going to be there. Then it's the issue of getting enough space and dropping that in, because it's got to be on the left side, on the driver's side.
Oh, yeah.
You'd have to potentially widen that out. I'm not sure if that has been looked at all by the applicant. No.
Put an island in there.
You'd have to. Then you need that space in between, which you're probably talking, well, this one's about 6 feet. I mean, it's gonna be somewhat sizable. But I mean, that's something we could look at too. I mean, we could always amend that after the fact if that's something you wanted to look at.
I just asked the question because as I look at this, that thin strip in between the drive lane and the parking, from a snow storage standpoint, it looks like it's 2 feet, which is not even as wide as the counter that we're sitting at. And it just seems like if we get a 6 or 7 inch snow, I don't know, maybe there's a way to do it, but it just seems really impractical that's going to work to me.
Other questions, comments, or Alder Gasco?
For that side of town, where is the nearest ATM currently? Does anyone know?
Mr. Sayer?
Well, the newest one, once Quick Trip is done, will be right across the street.
All right, so they'll have another one over there.
Yeah,
But that one will be inside.
Will be inside.
Okay.
BMO Harris is just down the street as well.
I think my concern again is, for a number of users, only saying 4 to 12, if we start thinking about the draw the high school will have on the weekends and people needing money for concessions and stuff, I think 4 to 12 is low, considering that the assumption is there's enough Summit customers that we're building a branch there anyway. So 4 to 12 to me seems awfully low. If it was 4 to 12, that'd be great, because I don't think there would be conflict, but I just don't see that happening, especially when there are events going on at the high school and people, visibly it's going to be the only one that you can see in the area.
Other questions, comments, or motions from the Plan Commission? Any thoughts? I guess I'll just call on myself to stall for time. Where are we in the code rewrite? Because, for this case, as others have said, if it's really 4 to 12, it does seem incredibly excessive to have that much space.
So I believe the plan is for the consultant to come back next month for discussions with the Plan Commission. So it's being worked on, but it's not there yet to say this is what it's going to be. We're not there yet.
Do you have understanding when the applicant would want to break ground on this?
When do you want to break ground? In the spring? Early spring? Yes, spring.
Okay. All right. Other Commissioner Tucker-Long?
I'm wondering if we could get the applicant's thoughts about combining it with the existing drive-through of Building C. Do they have?
If the applicant would like to address the question.
Good evening, Dan Seeley with Steve Brown Apartments. 142 is the parking count. Apologize, I didn't have that number off the top of my head. I like that idea, Commissioner Manley, and I've tried to move it around so many times and forgotten about the left-hand thing every time I've tried to move it too. Regarding widening that specific drive-through, the issue is there's a utility easement right there that we're already butting up against. And so to make that particular piece of real estate any wider, we'd cross over that utility easement, and that's going to open up a whole bunch of other cans of worms that will be challenging to navigate. Those are my thoughts on that issue.
Thank you. As long as you're up there.
Sure.
would a 1 to 2 month delay completely sabotage your plans, or is that something you guys could work with?
Our plans, we're going to deliver the site at the beginning of June.
Okay.
I'd have to turn that over to the representative from Summit to discuss their schedule more in detail. We're going to deliver regardless of whether or not Summit's ready to build out, but their schedule is their schedule. So I'd defer to Summit on that one.
We're ready to begin this spring,
Okay.
and we want to open when the center opens. When other portions of the shopping center opens, we want to be part of that opening.
Gotcha.
This fall of 2020.
Commissioner Manley?
Are you comfortable that if you have this drive-through as it's proposed adjacent to Stephen Way, that 2-foot strip of
Snow removal?
land,
Snow
yeah,
removal.
for snow removal, that you'll have enough snow storage to make that work?
Yeah, we've spoken with the snow removal contractor who does the majority of our properties and currently serves West End, the apartments, who will take this on as well. I think we've got enough space on the site for snow storage, and if we don't, it becomes a snow hauling exercise, and that's just an operational issue that we would have to take on and solve. Obviously, we've got to keep both the parking lot and the potential drive-through clear, so if that means we've got to haul, we've got to haul. But between here and the apartments, I think we've got enough real estate. Our contractor thinks so as well. But, we'll get a snow tsunami and have 2 feet of snow to haul in one day, and then
Right.
then we'll be in trouble. But we'll figure it out. It's operational. Not concerned.
Alder Gaskell?
So just running the math, that's a 5% reduction in parking if we go with the internal configuration. Is that a deal breaker?
One of the
I
things
know
that
you
we're
have a preference because you don't want to lose parking, obviously, but does that mean if it doesn't come out of here?
One of the things that we've heard and continue to hear from potential users is parking and concerns about parking and desire for reserved parking in front of various spaces and things like that. Parking is a huge it's a huge concern for potential users, and so to further limit, I think if I remember right, Adam, we're already just barely under the required threshold that the city recommended, or that's in the city code, but because we have the adjacent apartments, we were able to make that go because we could work out a cross-parking arrangement with ourselves, basically. But between the apartment buildings, the high school, the potential users and future users, it's a major concern, and we'd like to retain as much of it as we can. And so I think that with KL Engineering having reviewed this, the traffic consultant that we use regularly, with AECom taking a look at this and feeling comfortable with it, I think that we're all comfortable with it. And parking is a driver, but it's not the only driver. I think that internal circulation through the parking lot isn't necessarily the best solution either. The parking lot could potentially be busier than Stephen Way, and so it could be open for more conflicts as people are coming and going. Vehicles aren't looking for cars coming in and out of drive-through lanes while they're trying to find a parking space. And so I think that given the estimated counts provided by Summit, and the fact that both KL and AECom have taken a look at this and feel comfortable with it, I think that we continue to believe that it's the best solution, in addition to preserving the most parking.
And when you say users, are you talking about your potential tenants or?
Yes,
Okay.
potential tenants.
Okay.
We hate using the word tenant, so
Right.
users.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if we go with the configuration as proposed, what recourse does the city have if in a couple of years from now it's just a big mess?
Mr. Sayre?
I think we'd have to work with the applicant to resolve it. I don't anticipate it's going to be a big mess. I think if there's a mess out there, I think staff has the same snow removal concerns that Commissioner Manley had, but it's on private property, so I hate to say it, not our problem. I don't think it's ideal. I think ideally, what Mayor Diaz was alluding to a little bit here, if the new code was done, we change the code to kind of what is being recommended in there, because I can promise you it's not going to be 100 feet. It's not going to be 40 feet for something like this. But that's still an option. We could try doing that. You know, we could talk to the consultant, see if that's going to be expedited. I just don't, for something that small, I don't see them pulling that out and doing that as just a small piece of it. But the recourse on this in the future, if it's a mess, you know, it's a private road. We have limited abilities. Our only ability on the road is going to be fire lanes, making sure vehicles are being towed out or removed, and the snow is being cleared out so we can get our fire trucks and police in there. But it's a private street. It's not a public street. So it's going to be, for better or for worse, the developer's problem.
And I think that's my concern, is I keep harboring on this a little bit, but like high school kids, there's no sort of rhyme or reason to what they do, and just mass of, especially at lunch or passing times, especially if that's a Starbucks, which some sort of drive-through fast food option, that's going to be the absolute closest one. I'm just a little bit worried that it's just going to be a mess.
Other questions or comments, or Commissioner Dr. Long?
This is a question for the applicant. So going back to the drive-through by C4 again, is it possible to shift building C4 like to the left, like towards the parking lot just a little, to make up the room you'd need that would cross over that utilities easement? You might lose like 1 or 2 parking spots in that first one, but I feel like not having the drive-through there would give you back so many parking spaces. You might still be ahead.
We've got foundations poured for all 4 of the buildings.
Okay.
As Adam indicated, we've got sticks framing coming up, I think I came in from the east, so I didn't see it this week, but I think framing starting on 3 out of the 4. So unfortunately, shifting buildings at this point is not an option.
Other questions, comments, or motions from the Plan Commission? Commissioner Manley.
I think we're having a good discussion about, from a site plan standpoint, what's the best way to accommodate a drive-up PTM. But the question that we're on is the conditional use permit, and it seems like everybody sort of agrees that having a drive-through is fine. It's just a question of how do we configure it on the site. So I don't want to cut anybody off from debate, but on the question of the conditional use permit, I would move that we make a recommendation that the Common Council approve the proposed conditional use permit for the drive-through to be located at 150 West End Circle.
Excuse me. Motion by Commissioner Manley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Lytle. Excuse me, Commissioner Manley.
Nothing further to add.
Motion before the body. Commissioner Lytle.
I partially seconded to just give the opportunity to ask the question, have we ever written conditional use permits that have a 5-year sunset or non-permanent? And the way you're shaking your head leads me to believe that's not even an option.
No, you can't. Once it's granted, once it's built, you can't take it back. You can put criteria in there that the law has changed in this last couple of years on how conditional use permits can be done, and even the conditions you can put on them. But typically, no, once it's built, as long as it kind of meets the standards of when it was built, it's grandfathered to an extent. So no, you can't take it back once it's been granted.
Understood. I guess I remain concerned by some of the same issues other commissioners have raised, but I do think rather than sitting here pretending to be a traffic engineer, I'll defer to the recommendations for this option that were given by both AECOM and the applicant's engineer, and I would vote for both this and the site plan.
Other questions or comments from the Plan Commission on the motion? I'll just call on myself and say, yeah, I think we do need to have a larger discussion, which isn't this conditional use permit regarding the requirements for a drive-through, because I don't think they're flexible enough for this situation, and I hate to see people have to build something that there's no public interest justification for, just because our ordinances aren't quite as flexible as they could be. So I'm definitely eager to take care of that. I do also want to say that I really like the shared parking, and that's part of the reason why there isn't perhaps as much parking as there would be in another development. But I think that's a good thing, because with shared parking, you'll get people using parking throughout the day, and I think that's potential higher and best use of the land. So I think I'd be willing to go along with this, with the understanding that I wish there wasn't such a footprint. But other questions or comments from the Plan Commission? Seeing none, all those in favor of granting or recommending to the Common Council to grant the conditional use permit for proposed in-vehicle sale or service land use to construct a drive-through to be located at 150 West End Circle, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next, we are on 5B, which is discussion and possible action regarding site plan review to allow for the construction of a drive-through located at 150 West End Circle. Questions, comments, motions on the site plan? Commissioner Lytle.
I'll make a motion that we approve the site plan allowing for the construction of a drive-through located at 150 West End Circle.
Motion by Commissioner Lytle. Is there a second? Second. Seconded by Commissioner Bear. Anything to add? No. Motion before the body. Questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the site plan to allow for the construction of a drive-through located at 150 West End Circle signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, no?
No.
And that motion passes 6-1, if I'm counting right. With that, we will move on to item 6, which is a public hearing and regarding a conditional use permit amendment to the Epic Systems Corporation group development to allow for the construction of 2 office buildings on Campus 5 located at 1979 Milky Way. Mr. Sayre?
Thank you. The request tonight is for a conditional use permit for a group development for Epic to construct 2 additional office buildings as phase 2 to their Campus 5. This requires a public hearing before the Plan Commission. The Plan Commission then makes a recommendation to the Common Council, and this would potentially go to the Common Council for next Monday night's meeting. As part of this, we did publish the required public hearing notices in the newspaper, the notification signs, and also the notifications to the neighbors, and also posted the plans on the city's website.
Thank you for that overview. With that, I will move we open a public hearing regarding the conditional use permit amendment to the Epic Systems Corporation group development to allow for the construction of 2 office buildings located at Campus 5 at 1979 Milky Way. Is there a second? Second. Second by Commissioner Manley. All those in favor of opening the public hearing on this topic signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, no? And we are in the public hearing at 7:03. Seeing nobody coming to the podium, a motion to close the public hearing would be in order. So moved. That was a tie between a lot of people. I think it was Commissioner Manley. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Heinzen. All those in favor of closing the public hearing signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed, no? And the public hearing is closed at 7:04 p.m. Mr. Sayre.
Thank you. Once again, this is for a conditional use permit and also site plan approval for Epic to construct 2 buildings for their Campus 5 Phase 2. Buildings are known as Mystery and Castaway and are indicated in the red area on the screen before you. Mystery would be constructed on the existing parking ramp, and Castaway would be constructed off that parking ramp, but still connected by a walkway. Plan Commission provided an initial review of the designs at the December Plan Commission meeting. The Plan Commission was encouraged by the plantings of the trees, and they also liked the unique architecture of the building. The buildings themselves are typical of what Epic does. They build high quality buildings, unique buildings. This is the mystery building. It's similar to what the Plan Commission saw in December. Once again, using stone and brick and a variety of materials. Staff has no concerns with the design of the building. Once again, access to the site would be from the Campus 5 parking ramp. That ramp was built with over 3,000 spaces underground, so there is sufficient parking on the site. Access for vehicles would be unchanged as well by the ramps that are on the property, and also an access point to the north as well towards the intersection. So staff has no concerns with that, with access in the property. Once again, back to mystery. Like I said, similar to what the Plan Commission saw. It's the same submittal, so there aren't any changes to it. And then Castaway would have more of that ship-like feel to it, hence the name Castaway. Once again, very unique design. This is, obviously what Epic is part of what they're known for in their building design, creating a unique place to work. Staff has no concerns with how the buildings look. They're very unique, and they're using great materials to kind of blend with the theme that's currently on the campus itself. We did go through the conditional use permit findings of facts, and it meets the requirements of the ordinance. So with that, staff recommends the Plan Commission recommend the Common Council approval of the amendment to Epic's group development conditional use permit to allow for the construction of 2 office buildings on Campus 5. And then second, approve the site plan for 2 office buildings on Campus 5 to be located at 1979 Milky Way. The applicants are here tonight. They'd be happy to answer any questions from the Plan Commission.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments, motions on 6A, which is discussion and possible action regarding the conditional use permit for these 2 buildings. Commissioner Tucker-Long.
I move that we recommend that the Common Council approve an amendment to Epic's group development conditional use permit to allow for the construction of 2 office buildings on Campus 5.
Motion by Commissioner Tucker-Long. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Lytle. Anything to add, Commissioner Tucker-Long? I'll just add myself and say that I'm glad to see Epic is continuing to succeed and has the need for extra employees. Any other questions or comments on the motion? Seeing none, excuse me. All those in favor of recommending to the Common Council to approve the conditional use permit amendment to the Epic Systems Corporation group development to allow for the construction of 2 office buildings on Campus 5 located at 1979 Milky Way signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Now we'll move on to 6B, which is discussion and possible action regarding the site plan review for Epic Systems Corporations to allow for the construction of 2 office buildings located at 1979 Milky Way. Questions, comments, motions? Commissioner Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move to approve the site plan for 2 office buildings on Campus 5 to be located at 1979 Milky Way.
Motion by Commissioner Bear. Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Tucker-Long. Anything to add? Okay. Questions, comments on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the site plan for Epic Systems Corporation to allow for the construction of 2 office buildings located in 1979 Milky Way signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next, we'll move on to item 7, which is discussion and possible action regarding a site plan review for a substation to be located at 850 Northern Lights Road. Ms. Holt.
The applicant is requesting a site plan review to construct a switchgear building as part of an electrical substation to meet growing energy needs. The proposed building requires site plan approval as the substation is permitted by right. The substation is located at 850 Northern Lights Road. To the north is Good Shepherd. To the east is Whispering Coves, and the substation will be located on a former quarry that is now being filled in with debris. Access will continue to come from the existing access point seen on the map right now. Staff has no concerns with that existing access point as it is currently in use today. The applicant has provided staff with an updated landscape plan that is not included in part of the packet. The applicant has placed extra trees along the east with Whispering Coves. To the north for Good Shepherd, they have planted in 2018 different trees with a berm after discussions with Good Shepherd. They are adding additional trees, as you can see on the site plan, and then to the south, where it was not previously screened in the packet, they have added additional trees with a berm, and we're still working through some of those discussions. But again, staff has no concerns with this, as it is well screened for a substation, and just in general terms, it's completely covered all around it. The applicant is also proposing a stormwater improvements, and staff has no concerns with stormwater improvements at this time. The proposed building will be a 26-foot by 130-foot, one-story ATC standard gray metal building. Staff has no concern with the design of the building, as this is a substation, and the building design should not attract attention. It's going to be behind a fence and heavily screened from anybody who's looking from the street or from any pavement that you can see on the site plan. Staff recommends the Plan Commission approve the site plan to allow for the construction of a 3,484-foot square foot switchgear building located at 850 Northern Lights Road.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions, comments, motions on the site plan review? Commissioner Manley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The additional trees that appear to be added on the sort of the southern end there, are you comfortable that because I think at one point we were considering having, once the quarry is completely filled in, having this area to the south as a potential recreational area for the city. Are you comfortable that the level of screening that the applicant's talking about will serve as a sufficient screen, should we just decide to go ahead at some point in the future, have that land to the south be a city park or trail or recreational area of some sort?
I think this is a vast improvement over what was originally proposed in the staff packet, and I think with the addition of the berm to give it height, with the landscaping on top of the proposed berm in that area, will be sufficient. We're still, for the parkland proposal, we don't know the exact elevations of what we want to fill and how it would roll or not roll, or if it's flat. And so that might also help over time, because a lot of the plantings will be mature in the future by the time the park starts coming in. So that will be helpful versus having new growth immediately.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or Alder Gaskell?
So it says that that's going to be located on land owned by the city. Are we going to continue to own it, or will there be a sale of this property to Epic?
So we would continue to own the land. It'd still be our pit, but there'd be a substation on it. Epic wouldn't own it. It's actually ATC who's going to be operating the substation.
Okay.
Other questions or comments from the Plan Commission? Or motions? Commissioner Manley?
I'll move that we approve the site plan for the substation to be located at 850 Northern Lights Road.
Motion by Commissioner Manley. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Commissioner Heinzen. Anything to add, Commissioner Manley? I'll just add that I'm happy to see additional trees as part of the landscape, and I think that the eastern white pines are a good species choice. Motion before the body. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the site plan for a substation to be located at 850 Northern Lights Road signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And that motion passes. Next up, we will move on to item 8, which is a discussion and possible action regarding an initial review for Epic Systems Corporation to construct a workshop building located at 1979 Milky Way. Ms. Holt.
Epic is requesting an initial review to locate an on-site workshop that will be used for woodwork and paintwork. The building is intended to include office space, paint shop, art studio, and woodworking shop. In June of 2014, the contractor annex was located in the vicinity of the proposed location of the workshop. which is noted on the map. And then in May of 2018, the vehicle fleet maintenance workshop was approved, and that is located near the workshop as seen on the map too. The building right now will meet all the requirements for the suburban industrial zoning district. Staff has no concerns with the proposed location as it's near all the other contractor buildings that would service similar uses. It is also not visible from any roadways. Access to the site will continue to be from the existing access drive and connects to the contractor annex building and the existing parking lot. The second access point connects to an existing gravel driveway, which would be used for delivery of large bulk materials. Landscaping will be done to the building. At this time, it's an initial review, so we don't have all the details on the landscaping plan, but they do have some proposals that are shown here, and it is still heavily landscaped. The applicant is proposing to modify the existing detention pond to handle the increased stormwater runoff. Staff has no concern with that at this time. The architecture of the workshop would be very similar to all the other contractor buildings in the vicinity of it, which would be a red barn with solar panels on top of it. And staff has no concern with the design of the buildings. Staff recommends the Plan Commission review the submitted materials and provide feedback to the applicant.
Thank you for that explanation. Questions or comments from the Plan Commission? I'll just say that for me, I think the building looks good, especially the solar panels, and I think it's always great when applicants exceed landscaping requirements. Any other feedback from the Plan Commission? Going once? Going twice? Ms. Holt, is there anything that you wanted to specifically hear back from us, or does staff have enough info?
No, they just like to come before you to get initial comments before they come back, hopefully in the next month for approval.
Last chance for feedback? All right, with that, we will move on to item 9, which is reports and comments from the Planning Department. Mr. Sayer.
I don't think we have too much on here. First thing to announce, though, is that we were awarded as a bronze bicycle-friendly community. We joined 488 communities across the United States as a bicycle-friendly community. This was a joint application with other municipalities in the area, but it just recognizes some of the improvements that we've made over the last few years, including the bike path along South Main Street from Wayland to Locust Drive, and also the new bike path along County Highway M. The police department holds a bike safety event in June, and then Sugar Creek Elementary School has also had a variety of bike events at the school, as well as some safety events there too. So appreciate working with those municipalities on the application. Also thanks to Sugar Creek Elementary School just for their work in the community and work with us on the application. But it's a nice recognition for the city. Second thing is just development projects going on in the city. West End is obviously under construction. Epic is working on their office building. Lincoln Street Apartments across the street, and ACS is actively under construction as well. I think I've mentioned it before, but part of that ACS project is the extension of Liberty Drive connecting to Wayland Road. So you'll be able to drive north on Liberty Drive from County Highway M and connect to Wayland and be able to kind of have a better connection on the southeastern side of the city. But all our development projects have been updated on the city's website. We are in the process of interviewing new planning directors. The intent and goal of that is to have someone in place here, I would hope, by the end of February. That's the goal. So maybe March Plan Commission, somebody new will be at the meeting, but that is in the process right now. But I'd be happy to answer any questions the Plan Commission has about anything happening in the city.
Questions from Plan Commissioners? I have one. So bronze is pretty good. How do we get to silver?
In the packet, they have a list that shows our bronze ranking and percentages, and then it also shows how to get to silver. Loosely, a lot of it deals with policy level things.
Gotcha.
Some of it is like Bike Month. Well, we had our first one last year, and that's the first time we've done it, so it was kind of unknown, so we can improve upon that. They really push the active bike advisory committee and other subcommittees for bicyclists. You know, that's something that could be done, but a lot of places don't do it because it's another committee that you have to do, but they have people who just talk to Plan Commission and other committees as a whole, but that doesn't count the same way in their ranking system for some reason. You know, more education, and we've been implementing our bicycle and pedestrian plan that was written for us, and I think we're about 75% through that now. So then we'll have to figure out what the next steps could be to start filling in gaps or moving forward with that. Some of the easy things to pick from, what could be signage and just wayfinding, signing, and things like that. But again, we have 4 years to do it. So if we start making a plan for it, it's easier to implement versus this was our first application and we actually got bronze right off the bat, which is surprising to some of us, especially for the first application. And I think it helps because we did a regional application with other people around us, so we could show the connectivity. And now we need to boost our own things inside the city. And that will help us get to silver, but again, it's no guarantee you could get bronze the next year again.
Commissioner Heinzen, then Alder Gaskell.
Sure, that's great news. Sounds fantastic. One thing we could think about is paving Military Ridge through the city.
Mr. Sayer, did you have something to add?
We're working on it. Still are, yeah. We're still meeting the DNR. Yeah, it's
Working on it for years.
Like not to compare us to Fitchburg, but Fitchburg has everything paved, and it is a spectacular bicycling community.
we're getting closer.
Okay.
So we're getting, I think, closer than we've been ever. So we'll see. Snowmobile Club, I mean, it's a snowmobile route, and it was built with snowmobile funds, and the challenge is that if they close off their access to the park and ride, and it could potentially damage the snowmobile trail system. So trying to work with them and to find some alternatives. So.
Alder Gaskell?
I was just going to say, so this whole kind of system is based on the E's, and there's 6 E's. Engineering is only one of them, so there's equity and education, and those are the things that are much more intangible and not necessarily things that we as a city can do. A lot of the education stuff has to come from the school side, so getting to silver would be a significant jump for a community of our size. So bronze is pretty good. Most communities get honorable mention and then sort of drop off the list. So if you want to do silver, it's going to be an investment financially too. You have to make your position the / bike ped coordinator too, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Other questions for Mr. Sayer on the planning department report? Seeing none, we'll move on to item 10, reports and comments from plan commissioners. Anyone have any reports or comments? Someday somebody will. Next up is item 11, adjournment. A motion to adjourn would be in order.
So moved.
Motion by Alder Gaskell. Is there a second? Second. Second by Commissioner Bear. All those in favor of adjournment signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. And we are adjourned at 7:23 p.m. Thank you.